cover story tonight, a meeting between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It will be historic, if nothing else. The first of its kind face-to-face meeting between leaders of the United States and North Korea. For the past 1 year, these two leaders have traded insults, called each other names, and even threatened to launch a nuclear war. So what led to this change of heart? Our next report explains.
They traded insults, they made verbal threats, they boasted about their nuclear weapons. And now they are set to meet. American President Donald Trump has decided to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for an unprecedented summit. The surprise announcement came after a South Korean delegation paid a visit to the White House. After a meeting with Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, they delivered the North Korean leader's invitation for a face-to-face meeting.
I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests. He understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue. And he expressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible. President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization.
In a lot of ways, this diplomatic breakthrough is one of its kind. No sitting US president has ever met a North Korean leader. On the other side, Kim Jong-un, for the very first time, has expressed willingness to hold negotiations over North Korea's nuclear program. Japan has welcomed the talks, but Tokyo wants the global community to maintain its pressure on Pyongyang.
核ミサイルの完全検証可能かつ不可逆的な形での放棄に向けて、北朝鮮が具体的な行動を取るまで最大限の圧力をかけていく。この日米の確固たる立場は決して揺らぐことはありません。4月中にも訪米し、日米首脳会談を行いたいと思います。そのことでも合意をいたしました。
The Kim-Trump summit could overturn decades of hostility, but not all are convinced. Some fear the sudden change of heart could just be another ploy of Kim Jong-un. After all, talks have happened before and failed.
I think there's a lot of skepticism, though, because, as your correspondent said just a couple of months ago, we were talking about, airstrikes and nuclear war and things like that. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, within 2 months, we're talking about, sort of some kind of final deal on the peninsula. I would be amazed if it all goes that rapidly. A lot of people have been working on this issue for decades and decades. So, I think we all sort of need to sort of slow down a little bit and see what the North Koreans are really offering.
The thaw on the Korean peninsula has certainly diffused tensions for now. The war of words between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un had raised fears of a devastating nuclear war. While the US president mostly used Twitter to unleash his wrath on Pyongyang, last year, President Trump at the United Nations threatened to totally destroy North Korea.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Kim Jong-un threatened to launch a nuclear war on the United States, even as questions over North Korea's nuclear weapon arsenal remain. A number of bids to start a peace dialogue with North Korea have failed. The six-party talks, which was the last major effort by George Bush to bring permanent peace, collapsed in 2008. President Trump will be the fourth president to attempt denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. And this is the ultimate test for a man who calls himself the deal maker. Bureau Report, WION.
At the center of this deal is the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Has such a deal been attempted before? Well, some people have tried, not by meeting each other, but former US Presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton have met members of the ruling Kim family, not the president. This was only after they left office. On the other side, Kim Jong-un has never met any head of state since he took power in 2011. Neither has he traveled abroad as North Korea's leader. The dictator has only demonstrated his bluster so far. He showed his diplomatic side only recently when he hosted a South Korean delegation in Pyongyang. For the US diplomats too, this is an enigma. Kim Jong-un remains an enigma that they have to learn to crack.
There's considerable surprise, hope, and relief here in Seoul over the announcement that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are going to meet for nuclear talks in May. There's also a lot of skepticism. North Korea, after all, still refers to its nuclear program as its treasured sword and vows to never give it up. The United States and South Korea also plan to have annual war games later this spring that North Korea says are an invasion rehearsal. Past nuclear deals have broken down over the details, and especially over North Korea's refusal to allow inspections of its nuclear program. There's considerable curiosity if Donald Trump can succeed in this spur-of-the-moment summit where past experts on both sides have failed for generations.
So what do we know about this meeting? Precious little. Since North Korea made the offer for talks, they're expected to push the Trump administration to bring the US president to Pyongyang, but that's highly unlikely. It's very unlikely that the US government will agree to a proposal like this. It is possible that the meeting will be held at the Panmunjom Peace House in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Remember, Kim Jong-un is also expected to meet South Korean President Moon Jae-in there next month. But Trump and Kim is another deal altogether. They might agree to meet at a neutral location. We do not know. Here is what we know so far. Kim Jong-un had sent an invite to the US president for talks through the South Korean delegation. That was in Pyongyang just a few days ago. South Korea says that the North is committed to denuclearization. Pyongyang has reportedly halted all nuclear and missile tests for the moment. And according to the South Koreans, North Korea has understood that the military drills between the US and South Korea must continue. But sanctions against Pyongyang are likely to continue too, as the United States and its allies would like to see how the talks pan out. This is also a way for them to put pressure on the North. North Korea has not yet promised to abandon its nuclear weapons program. Experts say that it is unlikely that the two leaders will sign an agreement by the end of the talks, at least the first round. Small but incremental gains will help both sides establish a foundation for further negotiation.
I think a grand bargain where we get denuclearization in exchange for like the departure of the Americans from South Korea, I think that's highly unlikely. It's really, really unlikely we're going to jump to something that dramatic in just 2 months. I think it's far better to sort of start with small concrete steps, like maybe like an improvement in the human rights situation in North Korea in exchange for something from South Korea, aid or something like that. Or we could work on nuclear safety issues. There's a lot of concern about how North Korea deals with the fissile material that it has. Nuclear safety in North Korea is a great big question mark.
It is an encounter that the world could not have imagined even a few weeks ago. The meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump will be watched closely, not only because the stakes are so high, but also because the characters involved are some of the most colorful and dramatic of our times.
These visuals from a North Korean propaganda film gives us an insight into the mind of Kim Jong-un. The film is called The Country I Saw. It was produced by the North Korean government in 2012. It follows the life of a fictional Japanese professor who becomes enamored with North Korea's nuclear weapons.
미국에서 통과입니다. 지금 북조선 미사일이 우리 일본 상공을 지나고 있답니다.
But the most important part of the movie was this image, which is actually part of the climax of the film. There's nothing wrong with this photograph. Bill Clinton did visit Pyongyang in 2009 to free 2 American journalists from a prison in North Korea, but it was several years after he left office. But it is the hidden message behind this image that matters. The Kim regime has always craved for respect from global leaders and attention from the West. Kim Jong-un's rule so far has been defined by the arsenal he develops every year. There is a tight control over the media in North Korea, and Kim Jong-un is often seen upholding the personality cult of his family. and projecting the strength of North Korea to the world. North Koreans have long sought direct engagement with senior American officials in the past, an image with US President Donald Trump, who is arguably the world's most powerful leader, will be a diplomatic win for Pyongyang and give legitimacy to Kim Jong-un as the leader of North Korea. Donald Trump perhaps shares Kim Jong-un's flair for the dramatic, but America's first reality TV president so far has been criticized for his policies. His disagreements with his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson have often spilled out in public or even shared on Twitter. And the tweets have done more harm than good. But beyond an opportunity to achieve peace at the North Korean peninsula, a face-to-face encounter with Kim Jong-un will give President Trump a chance to understand the notoriously reclusive Kim Jong-un. Bureau Report, WION.
Trump's bombastic, triumphant style was visible in his latest tweet early on Friday morning. He wrote, and I'm quoting, "Meeting being planned. Kim Jong-un talked about denuclearization with the South Korean representatives. Not just a freeze. Also, no missile testing by North Korea during this period of time. Great progress being made, but sanctions will remain until an agreement is reached." At this point, the date and time for the first meeting, as we said, between the American president and the North Korean leader are still being worked out. And lest too much be read into it, Rex Tillerson weighed in on his president's tweet.
With respect to talks with North Korea versus negotiations, and I think this seems to be something that people continue to struggle with, the difference. My comments have been that the conditions are not right for negotiations. We've been saying for some time we're open to talks. President Trump has said for some time that he was open to talks and he would willingly meet with Kim Jong-un when conditions were right and the time was right. And I think in the president's judgment, that time has arrived now.
Understandably, expectations are running high, but Trump must be mindful of the pitfalls on the way. Why, for instance, is Kim Jong-un so agreeable to talks? Some Western reports say sanctions and isolation have forced Kim to try new tactics without changing his underlying strategy. North Korea may no longer seek reunification with South Korea, but it wants to remain a nuclear-armed power. A readiness to talk may prevent or delay further tightening of sanctions. It could give Beijing and Moscow room to maneuver on North Korea's behalf. And as if on cue, the Russians sounded a positive note.
Договоренности. Надеюсь, что она реализуется. Безусловно, это необходимо для того, чтобы нормализовать ситуацию вокруг Корейского полуострова. Мы также приветствуем договоренность Сеула и Пхеньяна о проведении в апреле, как я понимаю, межкорейского саммита.
China's actions must be keenly watched, says the online 38north.org, which monitors and analyzes developments on the Korean peninsula. It says that China may see an opportunity to assert itself in its own East Asian backyard. In a commentary, it noted that if the meeting goes ahead as planned, then Beijing may demand that international sanctions be relaxed, since the North has shown willingness to compromise. If the US vetoes a resolution to that effect in the Security Council, China may not feel itself bound by those sanctions anymore and will reopen its markets to North Korea. Russia will probably join Beijing, sensing another opportunity after Ukraine and Syria to cut Washington to size. South Korea will be under pressure to side with its ally and longtime protector America, but President Moon may also be under pressure to defend his own country's, South Korea's, national interest. Would the prospects of an untapped North Korean market and better relations with China outweigh the gains of the US alliance? That's the question South Koreans need to answer sooner rather than later. If the Trump-Kim talks go nowhere, the world can expect perhaps more of the same. Saber-rattling by the North, probably nuclear tests, and possible disintegration of the economic embargoes against the North led by China, determined to limit or reduce America's power in its backyard. The definitive list of the world's wealthiest people came out a couple of days ago. Forbes ranked Amazon's Jeff Bezos as the world's richest individual, Microsoft's Bill Gates at number 2. But more interesting this time are the big omissions. There were 10 Saudi billionaires on the Forbes list last year. None this time. Forbes says that there's no way to estimate their wealth because they had to pay undisclosed sums to the state to win freedom from detention.
Riyadh's glitzy Ritz-Carlton was a luxury prison for a reported 201 of Saudi Arabia's richest men in the last few months, in what was called a crackdown on corruption. Prince Al Walid, who has stakes in the world's biggest companies, including Lyft, Twitter and Citigroup, featured on the Forbes list last year. But this year, his name has been wiped off the list. He's not the only one. 10 Saudi tycoons on the Forbes rich list last year don't figure this time round. Here's why. According to Forbes, Al Walid and many others have been released, but checking out of the Ritz-Carlton cost billions. Most detainees were released after reportedly striking deals with the anti-corruption authorities on paying back some of their wealth. But the government has provided few details about who all were charged, who were the deals struck with, and how much they paid. The Saudi government's reported goal was to collect $100 billion, which would plug a hole in their budget that's been growing amid years of low oil prices. Very simply put, it means there is no surefire way to estimate the current wealth of the Saudi tycoons. Prince Al Walid bin Talal's net worth last year was $18.7 billion. In an interview hours before his release in January, he said he did not expect to give up any assets to the government. So how did he get off from detention? Similarly, nothing is known about the riches of Mohammed Al Amoudi, who owns a Swedish refinery and Saudi gas stations. His treasure chest was estimated at $8.1 billion last year. Another name dropped from the world's wealthiest rich is that of Saudi Prince Sultan Mohammed bin Saud Al Kabir, whose publicly traded Al Marai dairy is among the largest in the Middle East. Last year, his net worth was $3.8 billion. Forbes has said some of these billionaires may return to their rankings once there's greater clarity on their wealth. Since the crackdown on corruption, Saudi officials have been telling international investors their country is open for business. In fact, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is in London this week before heading for the US. And one of his goals is to rebuild the confidence of international investors rattled by his crackdown on corruption. Bureau Report, WION.
President Emmanuel Macron of France arrives in New Delhi tonight on a 4-day visit that will also take him to Agra and Varanasi. President Macron and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold bilateral talks tomorrow and co-chair the inaugural summit of the International Solar Alliance on Sunday. One of the highlights of this visit will be stepped-up Indo-French naval cooperation in the Indian Ocean region. WION's Ramesh Ramachandran looks at the personalities of the two leaders and convergence of ideas between them on issues ranging from climate change to counter-terrorism to defense and maritime security.
One is a consummate politician and a conservative at that, and the other a political novice and centrist. But Narendra Modi and the much younger Emmanuel Macron hit it off early on, with the French president giving the Indian premier a bear hug at the start of Modi's hastily arranged visit to Paris in June last year. It took place only 3 weeks after Macron's inauguration and barely 48 hours after President Donald Trump pulled the US out of Paris Climate Accord. But Modi's words were just the balm Macron needed.
साथ भी हैं और समझौते के बाद भी हम मिलकर के चलेंगे, मिलकर के करेंगे और भावी पीढ़ी को मिलकर के कुछ न कुछ तोहफा देकर के जाएंगे इस कमिटमेंट के साथ। और इस दिशा में हमने कई महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए हैं।
Macron was not one to disappoint either. Flanked by Modi, he reiterated France's commitment to strengthening defense and counter-terrorism cooperation with India.
Terrorism is striking both our countries in different way, but we will continue to work in the field of defense cooperation, maritime security, intelligence as well, and by fighting the spread of terrorism on the internet as well. I am working for the G20 to deal with that matter and will make a number of concrete decisions by the end of the year in the field. Lastly, I would like India to continue to stand by us in all forms of the fight against all forms of terrorism, and similarly France will stood by India.
This week it is Modi's turn to play host to Macron. The two will review India-France strategic partnership, which completes 2 decades this year, and co-chair the maiden International Solar Alliance Summit. Macron and Modi will discuss defense, maritime security, counter-terrorism, space, trade and investments, education and people-to-people ties. Civil nuclear energy will form another important agenda item. India and France will also sign an agreement recognizing each other's academic degrees in a bid to boost the number of Indian students studying in France. They will look to clinch a defense logistics pact whereby France will give Indian Navy access to the French bases in the Indian Ocean region, such as Reunion Island, Djibouti in the Horn of Africa, and Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. As France seeks to further integrate itself in the wider Indian Ocean region, a source says there is room for very strong bilateral cooperation between India and France. At the same time, France is not opposed to the idea of working in a multilateral format with India and other like-minded countries. It is Macron's first ever visit to India, so he will soak in the sights and sounds, including a boat ride with Prime Minister Modi on the banks of River Ganga at Varanasi. First Lady Brigitte Macron and he will keep their date with the Taj Mahal too. Ramesh Ramachandran, WION.
From war games to war zones, we've seen the indiscriminate use of landmines during the Afghan jihad 3 decades ago. It's much the same in Yemen now, where on an average, landmines are reported to injure 1 person every 5 hours. The mines need to be cleared out, everyone knows that, but it's a very difficult task when landmines are seen as a cheap and effective weapon of war. WION's West Asia Bureau Chief Daniele Pagani reports.
Leaving aside airstrikes, artillery shelling and small arms fire, war-ravaged Yemen's people have to contend with one of the most indiscriminately used weapons of war, landmines. This man lost his eye when an anti-tank mine blew up as his car went over it.
اللي صار بعد ما دخلت المقاومة هنا قالوا المخا محررة رجعنا احنا كنا نازحين رجعنا وحصلنا لغم بالرمة منطقة اسمها الرمة شرق يختول طرح بنا لغم وعيني ورجلي تعورت عيني وفي رجلي
أنا مشي وأنا وخيي وبعدين دعست وهو قرح اللغم فوقي.
Once the conflict is over, armies will leave, but landmines remain for decades, ready to blow up at any moment. Each side in the conflict blames the other for using landmines.
عند تحرير منطقة حيس وجدنا ألغام فردية أمام المنازل. كل منزل أمامه 3 ألغام فردية. فهذه المشاكل يواجهها الناس المدنيين هنا في أراضي اليمن الشقيقة، ونحن معاهم قلبا وقالبا نقوم بتطهير أراضيهم وتسليمهم الأرض وهي نظيفة بعدما عبث فيها الحوثي والميليشيات الحوثية الإيرانية ومن يدعمهم.
About 90% of landmines are of Russian make. Many were taken by Houthi rebels from warehouses in Sana'a. In the last 2 years, 65,272 landmines have been rendered harmless. Since 2016, 67 Yemeni have died, 2022 injured by landmines. A landmine injures 1 person every 5 hours. Little wonder hospitals are crowded with landmine victims.
هذا جزء جراحي يستقبل الجرحى من أفراد الجيش والمقاومة وحتى من الطرف الآخر من الحوثيين نستقبلهم نقوم بالعمل اللازم كحالة إنسانية يعني. برضه نستقبل الجرحى المواطنين واللي أغلب حالات الموجودة فينا أغلبها هي ضحايا ألغام.
Yemen ratified the Ottawa Convention ban on anti-personnel mines, but appeals to the Houthi rebels to stop using them don't seem to have worked. Predictably, the Houthis deny using them, blaming unspecified terrorist organizations. The Yemen-based Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is seen as another offender. The situation is made worse by the fact that fighting in Yemen is happening on multiple fronts. The Houthis and Al-Qaeda apart, proxy forces allied to Saudi Arabia and the UAE are also involved, making it difficult to fix responsibility.
Landmines are a very dangerous weapon. Reason for which they are banned in most of the countries in the world, and Yemen too is one of the signatories of the treaty to ban the use of landmines. But the problem is that in Yemen there is a war fought by many non-state actors, which are actors who are not following state institutions, who are not inside a regular and identifiable chain of command, and it is almost impossible to force these non-state actors to abide by international treaties, which is what is making the problem of landmines in Yemen even deadlier than other places in the world. Daniele Pagani from Amman for Jordan, for WION.